Welcome, friend. Follow me. We're going somewhere dark, somewhere dangerous. Most people would never dare enter the place we are going. There's no telling what horrors we'll find, what terrors we'll uncover. Don't say I didn't warn you. We might discover terrible monsters lurking there. Be careful, they could follow you out, or maybe they're already inside you. Are you afraid? Good. Now you are ready to enter the Warning Woods. Grandpa was a big man. You should have seen his coffin. It wasn't huge or anything, but he made it look tiny. I wasn't the only one who shared a muffled laugh about it, respectfully of course. Grandma and I shared a laugh about the struggle the funeral home probably went through packing in Grandpa's enormous frame. She ended her eulogy with, "The best way for us all to memorialize William is by laughing together." Then she waved me on stage. My suit pants swished like jet turbines in the silence as I strode down the aisle of that musty Lutheran church. I read and reread my little note card as I ascended the 4 steps at the side of the stage. Grandma smiled at me and gestured with her permanently trembling hand at the microphone. I stood before it and cleared my throat. How should you greet women's shoes? Grandpa's congregated friends and family stared back at me with a mixture of confusion and concern. Grandpa would have loved it. I screwed up my own confused expression and held the note card higher. I read it again. How should you greet women's shoes? I looked down at my 5-year-old niece in the front row. She looked like she didn't know what to do with herself. I gave her an open-handed shrug and the playful smile we liked to share, and, hesitantly, she asked loud enough for the people in the back, "How?" I gave her a thumbs up. I stepped back from the microphone so as not to blow out the speakers as I raised my right hand and belted, "High heels!" People laughed, probably more at the undeniable awkwardness than the joke itself. Grandpa would have howled at their discomfort. I'd inherited his twisted sense of humor. I leaned back into the microphone and said, "That one comes courtesy of Laffy Taffy, specifically the back of a cherry one, Grandpa's favorite." Grandma hugged me, then pressed something into my hand. She whispered in my ear, "He wanted me to give this to you." After lunch following the service, I drove to my lonely motel. My sister's families had all gotten Airbnbs, but 2 of them were sharing one house already, and the third had a 6-month-old and a rowdy dog that I couldn't stand, and I love dogs. Facing down an 8-hour drive home the next day, I figured a good night's sleep was worth $70. When I turned off the lights, I could see every stain in the curtains on either side of the motel room door. They let in way too much light from the parking lot. I started taking off my pants to climb into bed when I felt something poke my thigh. I'd completely forgotten about the heirloom Grandma gave me on the stage. Grandpa's letter opener. I found his letter opener sitting on the counter when I was probably 11. I thought the miniature brass sword was made of gold and imagined the jewels in the hilt were priceless gemstones. "Oh, this old thing?" Grandpa asked when I brought it to him, asked him about it. I remember him looking carefully at each embedded jewel. He told me, "This little blade is full of more stories than most human beings, Leo. You see all these jewels here? I can tell you where every one of them came from." I proceeded to ask about each one, of course. He told me the diamonds at the base of the hilt came from the false teeth of a Nazi commander he gunned down in the streets of Aachen. He said the emeralds at both ends of the crossguard came from a bandit he wrestled to the dirt in Australia and who gave him the jewels as he begged for his life. The long rubies on either side of the handle, he said, were given to him by a Jamaican prince stranded in the Caribbean Sea after Grandpa rescued him. My teacher once overheard me telling the last story to a group of classmates and informed me Jamaica doesn't have princes. I thought she must have been mistaken, but years later I asked Grandpa about it. That's when he finally admitted he'd made up all those stories, told me the gold was brass and the jewels were all artificial. Apparently, Grandma bought the letter opener at a yard sale and it hadn't even been his. I was old enough at that point to laugh about it with him. In my mind, it was still always Grandpa's letter opener, and I guess he remembered that. Grandma didn't seem to mind him passing it down to me. I cried in that creaky motel bed for over an hour after I'd hoped to be asleep. All the joking around was a symptom of my relationship with Grandpa, not an indication of my deepest feelings. I might have kept crying if I didn't hear the metallic squeak of someone turning my doorknob. Facing away from the sound when I heard it, I rolled over and sat up. Since the sound didn't repeat, I assumed a microscopic flaw in the lock set had halted the bolt before it fully closed. Maybe a change in temperature or pressure from the wind caused it to finally click all the way in. If this sounds overly specific, I had a closet door that did that when I was a kid. Scared the you-know-what out of me more than once. Maybe it was that childhood terror that kept me staring at the door even after I decided not to worry about it. My paranoid instincts paid off this time. If I had listened to myself, I would have missed the edge of a man's shadow making a cameo on the left curtain. I reached for my phone first thing and dialed 911. Noises from the lock told me the man on the other side was trying to get in, and he didn't sound like a drunk who'd accidentally stumbled to the wrong room. A shout swelled in my throat, but I choked it down. I thought yelling might electrify him like a shark scenting blood or a werewolf seeing the crest of a full moon over the trees. I gave my location to a dispatcher just as the bolt sucked back into the door. I didn't have time to explain my emergency to her, but I'm guessing by what she heard come out of me, she assumed a violent nature. 2 men with shotguns charged in, backlit by the parking lot's fluorescent light in the doorway. I dove off the bed, pleading loudly for them to take what they wanted. I slipped under the bed and told them I wouldn't move, but I guess one of them didn't believe me. I listened to one unzip every pocket of my suitcase while the other opened every drawer. He found my wallet and watch next to Grandpa's letter opener. He turned to show his partner he'd found the jackpot. His partner looked up. The room went white as a boom I didn't hear but clearly remember made the mirror on the wall rattle. In the dark and the intensity of it all, the first robber had seen the second robber's reflection in the mirror, had mistaken it for his actual body, and thought his real body was me. Believing he was saving his partner, he'd fired his gun and obliterated 3/4 of his partner's skull, the quarters which contained most of his face. The second robber fell parallel to me, his mindless tongue wagging faintly in the pale light between the shadows. The first robber stood frozen until the officers who blared into the parking lot 30 seconds later tackled him to the ground. He decided, or maybe he didn't, that the guilt of killing a man, later identified as his brother, was too much to bear. The cops tried not to put him down. They tried. I think they detected the same grieving desperation I did, but he eventually stole one of their tasers and hit the younger of the 2 officers with an arc straight to the neck. His partner had to protect her colleague, her own brother, in a sense. She did what she had to do. The police made me sit in the back of one of their squad cars while they investigated the deaths in my motel room. They'd placed me in cuffs but left the door open at first. After the detective arrived and recorded my account of what happened, he shut it though. I don't think he meant anything by it. I think it was just habit. Everyone's backs stayed to me for 15 minutes. I tracked on the stereo clock. Whichever officer's car I occupied was listening to the local rock station. Falling Away from Me by Korn faintly played behind the frequent crackles from the police radio in the center console. The tortured song somehow gave a new identity to the subliminal odor of stale booze and vomit. The music and stench seemed harmonious in a way. My mind escaped through the song. I began drumming my fingertips to its haunted beat as I closed my eyes and hummed along to Jonathan Davis's Anguish. I fluttered with embarrassment when a tap on the window broke my trance. I smiled up at the officer I expected to see, then screamed. I didn't see anyone standing outside the car door, but 10 feet away, I saw the robber with most of his head blown off stumbling toward me, his wagging tongue and dangling lower jaw blinking in red and blue flashes. His brother appeared at the car window, scowling down at me. he opened the door. I shouted for help and pushed myself to the other end of the plastic seat. The police radio went silent, but the music's volume increased, filling the car, filling my head. Officers came running. They ran right past the first creeping corpse. One ran right through him. The closer ghost lunged in after me, clamping one hand over my mouth and punching me in the throat with the other. This sent a flash through me and broke my voice. Hands grabbed my ankles and dragged me to the edge of the seat. Flashlights blinded me, and shouting voices disoriented me. The handcuffs prevented me from defending myself, and the police did nothing to block the furious blows delivered to my head and neck. Commands to stop moving, to stay calm, rained down on me as frequently as the jarring strikes. The officers lifted me out of the car and set me on the ground. The blows finally stopped, but I still wasn't able to explain what happened. I know the cops wouldn't have believed me anyway, but coherent words would have served me better than the rasping heaves that came out of me. I heard somebody shout for paramedics. Between the two officers' heads near my feet, the faceless brothers stumbled into view. I tried to point, but again the cuffs bit into my wrists under my back. I tried pointing with my foot, but this perceived kick earned me both legs pinned to the ground. The corpse squeezed between the officers and fell flat on top of me, his writhing tongue and sucking open neck inches from my face. His hands grabbed both sides of my head, and when I tried to pull back, his brother's hands pushed my face even further forward. I kicked hard enough to buck one of the officers off my leg, which encouraged a new level of desperation from his colleagues. More cries for paramedics. The ghost with the missing face was now close enough he could have licked me if he wanted, and I couldn't move my head. I couldn't even turn it. A hideous gurgling rose inside of the slurping wound. The same smell from the car struck me as the gurgling grew louder. I fought harder. I felt blood and sweat slicking my handcuffs. I heard useless reassurances as my limbs were pressed harder into the pavement. More figures dove into the fray, one striking my thigh. I felt a sting. The tattered throat aimed at my face opened. Thankfully, I detached from consciousness before anything came out of it. One short ambulance ride later, the paramedics wheeled me into the hospital for an evaluation. My voice returned on the way, so I could selectively explain what had happened. I omitted most details, but told the doctors I'd hallucinated images of the two men who attacked me as an explanation for my panicked behavior. They asked the police officer who stayed with me how my head received so many battery marks, which nearly sent me spiraling again. If I'd hallucinated the ghosts, how did they leave marks? The officer didn't have an explanation. I didn't offer one either. They determined I wasn't a threat to myself or others and removed the handcuffs finally. The doctor asked if I would be okay spending a night under observation before they discharged me, and I accepted. I know hospitals disturb some people, but being around all those people behind all those layers of security felt like an offer I couldn't refuse. Needles and monitors be damned. They put me in my own room, gave me something to help me sleep, shut the lights off, and left me alone. Throughout this whole ordeal, I never realized I needed to use the bathroom. Despite the clouds of medication rolling into my brain, I couldn't ignore this impulse any longer. The bathroom in my room offered little privacy, only a sliding door made of frosted glass to distort the patient but not completely hide them. I can understand the reasoning, but I still felt nervous that a nurse might walk in while I was relieving myself. I kept staring at the dark room through the glass. I finally flushed and started fixing my gown. I never heard the door, but when I looked up, I saw two silhouettes standing outside the glass. The bathroom light illuminated them, but the glass distorted them too much to tell whether they were hospital staff or, well, no one else should have had access to my room. I called out to them. They didn't respond. For obvious reasons, the bathroom door did not lock. I could find no means of securing it. I noticed the help button next to the toilet, though, and pressed it repeatedly. The figures stepped closer to the door, coming further into the light. They pressed their hands against it, and the shorter one pressed his tongue there as well. His dangling lower jaw clacked against the glass. I, dressed only in an open-backed hospital gown, had no means of defense. The faceless one retracted his tongue and slid the door open. "Please," I begged. "I'm sorry about what happened to you. Remember how I told you to take whatever you wanted? Remember, I just hid. Please, leave me alone." The faceless one's brother stepped around him into the light. For the first time, I saw his wounds clearly. Having been shot through the back, 3 gaping holes blossomed on his chest and stomach. He charged into the bathroom. I backed up, but I had nowhere to go. He swung an overhand punch down, catching me on the bridge of my nose. I tasted and smelled blood as I fell against the wall. The faceless one tripped on his way through the door. His brother used my gown like a sack to toss me face down, then planted his foot on my back. The faceless one grabbed my hair and pulled until the skin above my collarbone almost tore. He set my teeth on the rim of the toilet. I felt his brother's foot lift off my back. When my room door opened, the spirits released me. I rolled away from the toilet, stopping against the wall where the nurses found me. I saw the way they looked at me. They feared this crazy, broken patient lying at their feet. Hey, I said, grinning embarrassedly to assure them. "Don't worry, nothing screwy. I just, started feeling lightheaded on the toilet. Hit the button out of precaution and, glad I did." One of the nurses asked, "Did you black out?" "I, guess so," I said. He said to the other nurse, "Better get the doctor." She nodded, already turning to leave. The first nurse helped me back to bed and took my vitals. I caught myself staring intently at him, desperate to ask him for help. I knew something must have been wrong with my brain, but I didn't want anyone thinking I was truly insane. Besides, if someone knows they're crazy, they can't really be crazy, right? I didn't want to end up drugged and strapped to the bed eating Jell-O for 3 meals a day. The nurse caught my stare, though. Noting my alarming heart rate, he asked, "Are you sure you just blacked out in there? Nothing else happened we might want to look into?" I shook my head, noticing my lips involuntarily pursed shut. Nothing much came of my re-examination post-bathroom incident. I'd guaranteed myself at least one more overnight stay, though. The monotonous day after gave me too much time to dwell on the attacks. Grandpa interjected himself into my thoughts every once in a while to relieve me from anxiety with a few minutes of grief. I received a welcome distraction mid-afternoon when the detective who shut me into the car, again I hold no grudge against him for it, announced himself at my door. A nurse escorted him in. He informed me I'd been cleared of any wrongdoing and that treating me as a suspect had only been a formality. He felt sorry I'd ended up in the hospital. Implied was his sympathy for my mental injury. He told me he hoped having the evidence that belonged to me back would help, and handed me 3 plastic bags containing my wallet, watch, and Grandpa's letter opener. The nurse who came in with the detective immediately confiscated the letter opener and gave him a stern warning about handing me any more sharp objects. She told me she'd lock up everything he gave me with my clothes and it all would be returned to me when I was discharged. The detective could see I was disappointed. "You know," he said, "I looked into that letter opener in case it was something, well, frankly, I wanted to make sure this all wasn't some skirmish over an item of value." He shrugged. "Maybe I shouldn't tell you. Maybe you already know, but I don't want to disappoint you. It's some mass-produced piece of brass and plastic. Nothing very valuable." "Oh, I know," I said. "Doubt those robbers knew, though. The reason I had it, the reason it's valuable to me, is up until recently it belonged to my grandpa. I was excited to get it back because, honestly, it makes it feel like he's a little closer." I told him everything you already know about Grandpa's stories for the jewels and how he laughed about them years later. The detective found it pretty touching and wished me a swift recovery so I could get the letter opener back. He winked and said he wished he'd slipped it to me a little more subtly. Then he left. Then I was alone. A nurse offered me a walk around the hospital after dinner. I would have agreed to anything to get out of that room. She led me past the nurse's station to the elevator and took me to the second floor. The doors opened to a quiet lobby. We walked down a long hallway broken up by departments: radiology, cardiology, orthopedics. At the very end, we passed pediatrics. It had the largest waiting area, complete with a fish tank, tabletop train set, and highlights magazines. No different than when I was a kid. Parents sat in chairs lining the walls, some holding infants as they watched their older children spread whatever germs brought them to the doctor with each other. Standing in the back of the waiting room, next to the door to the doctor's office, lurking behind two boys playing with a bead track, the undead brothers waited for me. I made the nurse stop. I made sure she saw me looking into pediatrics so she would too. If she saw nothing alarming there, no dead men, one with his head blown off, I wouldn't say anything. She saw nothing and asked, "Is everything okay?" "Oh," I replied, laughing breathily. I could have sworn that little girl with the Etch-a-Sketch was about to slam it into the fish tank. "That wouldn't have been good," the nurse chuckled. I don't think she meant to be as patronizing as she sounded. I had managed to sidestep another episode, but I remained on high alert as we turned the corner into another hallway. I asked, "Where are we going?" She said, "It was going to be a surprise. Do you want me to ruin it?" Not in the mood for surprises, I said. "Yes, please." "The rooftop garden," she said. "It's above the breezeway between the hospital and clinic. It's not as pretty this time of year as it is in spring or summer, but it's still a nice spot to step outside." "I'll have to plan a return visit in the spring," I replied. This received a genuine laugh. In the upcoming department, the blood lab, I heard a deep, forceful laugh that mimicked the nurse's. My smile faded. The laugh sounded too loud, too present for its distance, and I detected a hint of malice in it. I couldn't find an excuse to stop this time. I tried not to look as we walked past, but the gravity of someone's stare turned my head toward them. The brother with a full head stood next to one of the blood-drawing booths. The faceless one was sitting in it, with 6 full syringes sticking out of his open neck. His brother jammed a 7th in and yanked back the plunger, sucking black blood into the tube as he sneered at me. I averted my eyes to keep from screaming or passing out. In the corner of my eye, I watched the sneering brothers step away from the booth toward us. The nurse asked me a question, but I didn't hear her. I stopped, bracing for the inevitable assault, and turned to face my attacker. Before he reached the check-in counter, a third man emerged from behind the curtain separating another booth and blocked his path with his back to me. He had an enormous frame which blocked my attacker from view entirely. I thought this stranger had stepped in his way by coincidence, but then he reached over, grabbed the curtain, and pulled it outward to block the faceless brother from my view as well. Grabbing my arm, the nurse said, "Come on, we're almost there." The man who rescued me was about to turn his head so I could see his face when she dragged me away. At the end of the hallway, she walked me through the first of a double set of sliding doors. The second required a badge to open. I looked out at the garden through the glass as she scanned her badge. On a bench positioned in the middle sat a large man bearing striking similarity to the one who just blocked the robber's ghosts. The door slid open. He looked at me. I froze again, but not out of fear. "Oh gosh, I didn't even think about the temperature. It's freezing now," the nurse said, stepping outside. She looked back at me in my hospital gown. I rushed through the door saying, "The fresh air feels nice anyway. Really nice." She was about to say something else, but I asked, "Would you mind if I went over and had a seat over there by myself for a few minutes?" I pointed to the bench. She looked uncertain but said, "I have to stay out here with you, but I can give you some space." "Thanks," I said. Just seems like a good place to clear my head. I sat on the bench and turned toward the man sitting next to me. Up close, I knew for certain who he was. The last time I'd seen his enormous frame, it had been crammed into his coffin. "You probably shouldn't talk to me out loud," Grandpa said, winking toward the nurse. He said, "I hope seeing me back there didn't scare you. Have those guys from the motel been after you this whole time?" I nodded subtly and blinked away tears. "Well, you don't have to worry about them anymore," he said. He stared into the setting sun. "You know, most people don't know what heirlooms were really for. I didn't until I shipped off to the war. Shortly before that, my grandmother passed. We all knew the end was coming, herself included. She had a small collection of jewelry that she divvied between her children and grandchildren. Mine was a thin silver chain. I took it with me at the last second when I went to join the front line. Just had a feeling I should keep it with me. If nothing else, it was something they could identify me by if my face wasn't available." He laughed. I grinned, wishing I could laugh along with him without alerting the nurse. Grandpa kept talking. "Back then, soldiers didn't talk about the ghosts they saw. But I'll tell you, son, they were everywhere. I saw guys I killed and guys who died next to me. They usually came at night, but I'd see them all times a day walking through the trenches, sitting in camp, you name it. This one guy I had to bayonet in the heart was especially persistent. Every time I saw him, he got a little closer. I knew he wanted to hurt me somehow. Something kept him away, though. Something kept him from getting too close. That changed one morning in the trenches when the guy next to me took shrapnel in his eye. He went into shock, started grabbing at me. He pulled me off the trench by my grandmother's necklace and wouldn't let go. The clasp broke. I kept the chain in my pocket until we got relieved and headed back to base to rest. That's when I locked it up and left it until I could get it repaired. 2 days later, we returned to the front. I left Grandma's necklace behind with the other things that would be returned to my family if I didn't make it back. That's all the chance the guy I bayoneted needed. He came out of nowhere during the fighting and grabbed me from behind. He shoved me face down in the mud. My buddies all thought I'd been shot. I couldn't breathe, hadn't had much breath in my lungs to start with, and that vengeful ghost held my head down to make sure I couldn't get any. But just like that, somebody rolled me over. When I looked up, the ghost was standing behind the guy who stopped to check on me. I pointed and warned him, but he didn't see anybody standing behind him. Shell-shocked, they called it back then. Like I said, we all saw ghosts during the war, but this guy, this young corporal, he hadn't seen much combat yet. His fresh mind had yet to be haunted. He couldn't get me off the line right away since they needed all the men they could get out there, but he put me on the first truck back to base, though. I protested, and some of my guys protested right alongside me. They'd all seen ghosts too. But that kid sent me back all the same. The ghost came with me. He was on the truck. Can't say when he appeared there, but it wasn't long after we got moving. I was sitting in the back with a bunch of guys with minor wounds, little stuff like blown off fingers and such, and the way they looked at me when I started screaming at the ghost, it made me feel like a coward. But I had reason to scream, I tell you. He came at me with the flesh of his heart beating through his wound. He put his hands around my neck and I couldn't grab hold of him to stop him from squeezing. My own heart was beating at 200 beats per minute, I bet. He took one of his hands off my neck and started punching my chest. I thought one of his blows was going to explode my heart. One of the wounded guys shook me, and I just fell to the floor. That got me away from the ghost for a second, barely long enough to suck in some air. Some of the guys started yelling to stop, but the driver said we were close to base. Guess it didn't make much sense to stop when we were so close, So we rolled into base, and I got all these wounded guys yelling at me that everything's fine and it's all in my head, but I'm really being choked by this ghost. That I know for sure. I really couldn't breathe, and I had real pain in my chest. I know I've told you some stories over the years, but this is all dead true. When the truck stopped, they yanked me out. All those guys with obvious wounds got all the attention at first, so I was left standing aside wondering where the ghost went. I'd lost sight of him when we all got out of the truck. Then somebody tackled me from behind. He threw me face down in the mud again, tried one more time to suffocate me. But just like that, he let go. I rolled over to get some air. When I looked up, there were 2 people above me. 2 ghosts. One I expected to see, the other not at all. It was my grandmother. That tiny woman pushed the bayoneted soldier down into the mud just like he'd done to me, only she kept pushing him through it until the ground swallowed him up. Just like that, swallowed him whole. My grandmother fingered a thin silver chain around her neck. She told me to get it fixed and keep wearing it as long as I was in battle. She said as long as I kept it near, she could protect me from dark powers, evil spirits and such. He breathed a deep sigh. Son, in war like that, it can be hard to distinguish the horrors in your head from the real ones all around you, but I swear after that night, I never saw another ghost. Not until I became one myself. What happened to me that day is why I made a point to give something special to everyone I care about when my time came. For you, it was the letter opener. Now that it's near you again, so am I. You just let me deal with those 2 guys who were giving you trouble, all right? I couldn't hold the tears back anymore. They'd started running before he made this promise to me, but when he put his arm around me, they poured. Hey, everything all right? The nurse asked. It was her hand on my shoulder instead of Grandpa's now. I wiped the tears away and smiled up at her, nodding. She said, You feel so cold. I think it's about time to get you back. I nodded again. Grandpa slapped my knee and stood, fading into the orange light of sunset. I didn't see any ghosts on the walk back to my room. When the nurse left me alone again, I didn't feel afraid. Not anymore. Had Grandpa's ghost been another symptom of my mental affliction? Possibly. But I thought whatever brand of insanity he came from might help cure me rather than hurt me, so I was willing to accept it. A sound brought me out of sleep that night. A wet slurping next to my bed. I startled awake. My eyes opened on the glistening, sucking neck wound of the faceless ghost. His brother's frozen hand clamped over my mouth before I could scream. I tried to pry his hand away, but I could not grab hold of it. The faceless ghost punched me in the ribs, causing me to lose my fight against his brother completely. He punched me again, an inch from the same spot. I felt my lower ribs press against my left lung. In response to my pain, his tongue wagged straight up in the air. His dangling jaw swung freely beneath it. I screamed into his brother's hand. The faceless one commenced a trio of punches to my stomach, followed by a 4th to my left kidney when I rolled to avoid more blows. My back arched in pain. Suddenly I could scream, though. A huge form darkened the lights behind the brother who'd been silencing me. The faceless one quit striking me to rush to his brother's aid. Grandpa's smile appeared in the faint light. He looked down on me as confident as I'd ever seen him. He asked, Hey, what kind of street does a ghost live on? I don't remember what I said, probably something along the lines of, Huh? His smile broadened. A dead end. Already holding the first brother around the neck, he caught the faceless brother's first punch mid-swing. Then his body lit up from within like a lampshade. He pulsed light through his arms into each of the brothers' ghosts, causing both of them to explode into ash simultaneously. Sadly, when his light faded immediately after, so did Grandpa. A nurse opened the door and turned on the light to check on me. He said, I heard a scream, is everything all right? I straightened myself on the bed and gave him a thumbs up. Just a nightmare, I said. Nothing to be worried about. I don't know if I should count myself lucky I haven't seen Grandpa since that night. I do wish I could see him again. I guess that's not fair of me. He's spent enough time on this side of life. Without the dead brothers tormenting me, I managed to earn the doctor's faith in my state of mind and bodily health. Once I quit spiraling into screaming fits and new bruises stopped showing up all over me, he saw fit to discharge me, giving me back my personal items as the paperwork was processed. I always keep the letter opener close. I take it to work in my backpack. If I travel, it comes with me. I sleep with it under my pillow, although I'm not certain I need it that close. It just soothes me, keeping it there. I suggest you do the same with whatever's been passed down to you by a loved one who is strong in spirit. Grandpa was a big man, but in the end, I don't think his size is what mattered. I keep thinking about his story about his little grandma defeating that enemy soldier. I think what gave him his power was really the purity and grit of his soul. Thanks to him, my own soul is in repair. I'll keep working on it, strengthening it, and maybe one day, I'll be as strong as him. You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For early, ad-free episodes and behind-the-scenes episodes I call Into the Woods, become a patron at patreon.com/thewarningwoods. You can also support the show by purchasing merch. The merch store and Patreon links are in this episode's description. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Warning Woods. And when you feel ready, meet me here for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.